Okay, I think we're rolling.
Okay.
All
Hi.
right. So, this is our interview on international schools. This
Yeah.
is Rosie Day. She taught English in Japan for how many years?
About 3 years.
3 years? Cool. And so you taught at different kinds of institutions in Japan. Can you talk about like what those were structured? Were they like public or private, and how are they similar and different?
Mhm. So I spent about a year working at an Eikaiwa, which is a private language school. We taught all age groups from toddlers up to like high level conversation classes in English. Are private. They were quite expensive to attend. It was a very big company. It's called Eon, and it was one of the biggest Eikaiwa companies in the country. So I did that for a year, and then I went on to work for an ALT company, so assistant language teacher, where I worked in four different elementary schools in quite a rural area, and they were all pretty similar grades, like kindergarten through five, and then I worked in the English classes there.
Cool. So, structure of like going through school, they move through school by age group, correct? Like
That's right.
kids about like 8 to 9 are in the same grade and they all move up together.
That's
Gotcha.
right. Yeah. Pretty
So,
much, yeah.
do they have any kind of like standardized tests that they have to do in order to move on to the next grade level?
They do a lot of testing in Japan, especially when it comes to like moving from elementary school up into high school. Um, it's pretty, yeah, it's very structured. I'm not 100% sure what happens for the kids that don't pass the tests. I don't think they redo grades there. I'm not sure about that. Um, but yeah, there is a lot of standardized testing still.
Gotcha.
And that's why the kids would come to the Eikaiwa because so it's very common in Japan to have elementary school through the day, and after school you'll go to like a cram school or like something like Kumon where you'll practice math more, or you'll come to the Eikaiwa where you'll practice English more. So kids can sometimes start at like 7 in the morning and they go to like 7 at night.
Gotcha.
So it's pretty intense.
Okay. Yeah. So, what were your classes like? How did you do your demonstrations? And like, well, I guess let's start with what did the physical setting look like?
Okay, so I'll do the Eikaiwa first because the schools in the Eikaiwa are very different. So at the private language school, um, very clean, organized space. When I first started there, we were just using whiteboards and like CD players. And then during the time that I was there, the company actually adopted like Apple TVs, and
Oh
you did
wow.
everything
Cool.
through
So,
them.
with the CD players, was that more to like listen to native speakers?
They do a lot of, well, I'm a native speaker, so I'm leading the class, but they do a lot of listening exams because in Japan, there's like the English language proficiency test, and in that, as part of that, you have to do a lot of listening exercises.
Oh hi.
Sorry. You have to do a lot of listening exercises. So we would play like a clip of some kids talking, or a couple having a conversation, and then the students have to answer a question on it.
Okay. Cool. I
And it
remember
was,
doing that kind
yeah,
of
I mean,
stuff. I
yeah,
did that
yeah,
in
very basic.
Yeah, I did that in French classes. We would listen to recordings, and then you'd either have to like write down what you thought they were saying, like in that language, just to identify like whole words and like where words started and stopped.
Yeah,
It was a
and it's very different listening to like a CD player. Like if you go to a foreign country and you listen to the radio, it's super hard to understand what's going on, and it's very different from if someone's standing in front of you talking.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so that was what that was for. It's very basic, and then we moved on to the Apple TVs where we'd have an iPad, and the classes were very structured. Like students would be on a certain unit, maybe they're on like breakthrough unit, and then they work through the textbook, and we would have an app that met the textbook, and we would take them through it. So that was really helpful, and that made everything a lot easier, and the students really liked that.
Cool. So it was like a like a textbook on a projector?
Like an animated textbook. So they had the paper textbook they took home with them, and then we would have the app where we take them through it, and it would mirror what they were looking at, and highlight words and give them answers, and then all the listening exercises were built into it as well.
Cool. Do you think that that was a useful teaching tool?
Definitely. Like, it just made everything so much easier. Like, once we started doing that, the prep time was just so much less, and then the students really enjoyed it as well, especially younger students. That
Awesome.
worked really well.
Awesome. And that had like, did it have like moving graphics or anything like that, or?
I think it might have had a little bit. One thing that I do remember is, like, for example, if they're having this conversation, it would like highlight the words as they're going through,
Okay.
which is really helpful for
Yeah.
students. For example, like there's a lot of like following along when you have a textbook to make sure they're on the right word. But that would like highlight it for them. Yeah, so that was helpful.
Cool. Similar to, like old children's like videos where it would have like the lyrics to the song and it have like the bouncing bubble that goes over each word.
Oh, like karaoke.
Okay, yeah.
Japan loves karaoke.
Yeah, okay,
That was
awesome.
gonna
So
work.
that's a really good analog for that.
The kids had songs and they would know how that all went.
Cool.
That
What's-
was, and then the elementary school was very different. Like elementary schools in Japan, from what I know, like I worked at 4 different schools, but in the same region. It was quite a rural region. Very, like, if you've seen any manga or anime, like the classrooms look exactly like that. They've still got chalkboards, use chalk. There's not even whiteboards. There was not in any of the schools I worked in, there were no smart boards or anything. It's just wooden individual desks. Everything's done on paper. They'd have like one TV for like the floor, and you wheel it along.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
you want to watch.
So that sounds like it was attributed mostly to like funding and accessibility to funds. Is that true?
Yeah, it worked. Like it worked, right? So I don't know if it's different maybe in Tokyo, but Nagano is a pretty sort of typical region in Japan, and from what I know, that's what the classes were like across the whole country.
Okay.
Japan is pretty. I think people think it's going to be really futuristic or like modern, and it's not, as you know, you've visited. So yeah, they're just a lot of things are stuck how they were 30 years ago, and they work, so they're not changing.
Gotcha. Cool. So like you said that there were like blackboards with chalk and like a TV that you shared with other instructors. What kind of things did you put on the TV?
I actually never really used the TV. I used it like once a year, maybe to show like a Christmas special film or something. But usually I would just use the chalkboard. Had a lot of flashcards, did a lot of interactive games, made a lot of handouts. No videos, or I know some teachers would bring in a CD player, but I didn't even do that.
Yeah. Still sounds pretty similar to like American schools or like the kind of schooling that you and I went through, when we were in elementary school, like not every class had like a TV in it, and like it was on a cart and you wheel it in. Did you do?
I don't know how different it is here now, because I've only worked at private schools in the States, and they all have smart boards in every room. And
yeah.
I don't know what the average like public schools like here.
Yeah, it's not dissimilar to that in a lot of instances, to the schools in Japan. My mom teaches at a public school, and it's it's kind of the same deal there. They probably have whiteboards. I haven't been in her class, but they probably have whiteboards and like a computer lab probably that they have access to for the whole school, maybe in the library, and then like maybe a TV. Do you think the kids were more receptive to the type of lessons that you could do in private school than you could in the public school? Or like, were there benefits to either or?
It's hard to compare because in a public school and it's like a class of 36 and they've been like cramming all day and doing sometimes I'd have 72. One time they put all I had 150 in one class once. They just put them all in the gymnasium.
What?
Just sit.
Okay.
The way that the English, if you have the ALT coming in, for the most part, you are like the comic relief. You are the foreign speaker that's coming in to provide this, like, first you speak in native English, but also just the kids are really receptive because all day they're just cramming, and then as an English teacher, you come in and you play games with them and you get them shouting and screaming. And singing.
So it was more fun.
They're really, really. It was yeah. You have to make it really fun. Like there's no. I mean, some teachers don't do that, but it's not going to work with a group of fifth graders. So that was really fun. And then the Eikaiwa was different because after like a long day of school already, maybe they've already been at school for 8 hours, and then they come in and they have to study English. And it's a room of only 6 kids. And you're making it as fun as you can, but once they get to like teenage years, they really don't want to be there.
Yeah. So,
but if I'm comparing before we got the iPads and the Apple TVs in the Eikaiwa to after, like I would say they enjoyed having the technology in the room, and I would say they were more receptive.
Gotcha. So you were talking about games. That was like an effective teaching tool for you, was making things into games. Do you have like an example of a game that you would play?
Sure. So in Japan, they really love rock, paper, scissors.
Oh, cool.
They call it junkan, and they just every decision is decided through rock, paper, scissors. Like who gets the last onigiri at lunchtime, or like everything is decided by rock, paper, scissors. It's a very fair. Who wins is like they won at rock, paper, scissors. So there's no arguing it. So a lot of the games would involve that. They just adored it. So a very common game would be like, if we have to practice, we do a review of last week. Maybe last week we learned, what's your favorite food? And we learned hamburger, French fries, whatever it is. So that's the conversation we've been practicing. So all the kids start off with 3 little glass tokens, and they have to go around the room and ask each other the question. So I'd be like, what's your favorite food? And they'd say French fries. And then you rock, paper, scissors, and whoever wins gets a token.
Okay.
And you do that for 5 minutes, but you can't rock, paper, scissors until you've had the conversation.
Okay, cool.
And that'll go on. If they run out of tokens, they have to come to the teacher and do it.
Oh.
It's stressful.
So like.
And then at the end.
So like, you had the rock, paper, scissors was like the fun goal that you got to, and then the reward for that was to get the token.
Sure. And then that would go on for like 5-10 minutes, and at the end it would be like who's got the most.
Gotcha. Cool. So the kids were super receptive to that because they love rock, paper, scissors?
Yes.
Awesome.
There was a lot of things like that. Or it would be just any game where they have to say something and then they get to do a thing.
Okay.
It's very simple. They come up, I ask them a question, they answer it, then they get to throw the basketball through the hoop. And if they get it through the hoop, then they get a point. Like the game is almost unrelated to the English you're doing.
Yeah, it was like, here's your reward, you get to do something fun now.
Yeah. So much fun that they don't. And they're super competitive, so it worked really well.
Okay, cool. So there were a lot of English speakers that taught in Japan. Is there some kind of cultural reason that you can point to for maybe English being such an important language for children to learn?
I mean, it's just the international language, isn't it? Like Japanese is only spoken in Japan, so they have to learn other languages, and they're really trying to push it more because they are really far behind other countries with their English education, because for many, many years you could get all the way through high school, I think, and take a test and never even say a word of English. Like you're just writing. So their handwriting is often really fantastic, good spelling's spot on. But when it comes to speaking, like there's just they're just terrified. This is like obviously a big uh, sort of generalization, but this is a very common thing there. So there's not a lot of speaking, and that's getting them behind sort of global markets. So they're pushing that a lot more now. I know they're hiring a lot more English teachers. Like the Japanese government are hiring a lot more than they used to. Um, yeah, but it's just a global language, and like places like Uniqlo, I know they were like going into using only English in their offices and stuff. So it's really important. And some of the students I had, like at the ACI where I had adult students too, and they'd work at big companies like Epson, for example. There's a they would wear their English language score like on a badge at work, and which is super embarrassing for them, but it would make them come to the private language classes. It's like I have to up my score.
Oh, okay. Huh. That's interesting.
Because at work, I have to wear it on my chest all the time.
Huh. That's really interesting. There's like a trend in education now where you receive badges, very similar to that. You know, almost like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, where like you do an activity and you learn something and you get a new badge. They're doing that in digital learning environments more and more, and there's pros and cons to that. But it sounds like in like a physical environment, it was super effective. Yeah, because like it's like I have a 79 and you have a 98, like. Huh. So there was a social motivation there with that physical badge element. Huh. That's neat. I never would have known that had you not told me about that.
I was surprised. I wouldn't say that it was a common thing, but it was definitely like with the adult students, they were coming to private classes so they could progress at work. Like that was definitely.
Gotcha.
And a lot of them hated it. Some of them loved it, but a lot of them hated it. They had to go for work. So.
Gotcha. Huh. And those were adults?
Yeah, those were adult students.
Gotcha.
And then we have teenagers that are prepping for college or high school. And then we taught as young as like 2 or 3 because they're trying to get their kid into the best. Same thing here, you know, they're trying to get their kid into the best preschool.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but it's big business there, and the classes will cost up to like $100 for a
Each
lesson.
class?
Yeah, for a private lesson it was $100. It was each month, so $100 for an hour.
Oh wow, yeah. And public school was free, right?
The schools are free, but then they're not getting the English education that they want, so they're coming to these private lessons.
Okay, gotcha. So when you did, you were mentioning like adult learners and teenagers. Were they in different groups when you met with them? If you met with like 3 people in the after school program or in the later hours, was that something that was divided up by like their proficiency in the language, or was it like an age group thing?
Mm-hmm. It was broken up, so they had different courses. So normally, like when it came to kids, they were kind of around the same age group. But once you get past 12, 13, they're just working through the steps. So you might have like a high schooler and you might have like a middle-aged person in the same class because their English level is the same.
Okay. So what was your experience like? Did you have a good time teaching English in Japan?
Yeah, I loved it. It was great. The Eikaiwa was incredibly intense and stressful. It was like 30 classes a week, individual classes. So every class could be different, and that's a lot to prep for 30 classes.
Wow.
And you'd have like a 5 break between the 2. So you might go from a 3-year-old class to like a high-level English discussion class.
Wow.
Just like, and you have to be like on top all the time. Your thing is to be this super positive, Genki, happy English. So
that
was, and you have to wear a suit all the time, and you're teaching 3-year-olds, but you're wearing a suit all day. It was really great.
They give you a sense of like authority in front of the classroom. Huh.
That's just kind of the Japanese thing, is to wear a suit. If you're at a business, you wear a suit.
So other teachers would wear a suit too? It wasn't just English teachers?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, in the schools, once you're in school, like an elementary school, you wear kind of sports clothes, like tracksuits and stuff. But if you're in any sort of business, then you're wearing a suit. So,
Okay.
so that it was stressful, but I learned so much. Like you can't you just have like 1,000 classroom hours after your first year or something.
Wow.
It's a lot, and you teach all levels, and they have a really good curriculum. The curriculum there is fantastic. So that was great. And then I used all of that knowledge when I went into the elementary schools and I was teaching my classes, which I went into with like pretty much no training, and you just go and you do it. But I was, I'd come from that background, and the elementary schools were fantastic. And like I said, you're like the comic relief for the day, and you get to just get all these kids really excited, and it's really fun. It was really good.
So
But a big class size, 36 kids is a lot.
yeah.
So it's tiring, but it was really fun.
Wow. So it sounds like you really like teaching the elementary school class because it was just a more fun environment.
It was great, and
Yeah.
just you're in the Japanese community because you're at the Eikaiwa. You have to speak English all day. Like you're not allowed to speak any Japanese.
Okay.
Like even in the office, like the Japanese staff that work there, you're not allowed to speak Japanese at all.
Okay.
So it's like an English immersion as soon as you walk in.
Oh.
But the elementary, obviously, you're just 1 hour a day from them in English, so everything's in Japanese, and you just get you really get absorbed into the culture there in a different way.
Cool. Are there any like distinct, like obvious differences between the education that you experienced when you were growing up and what you taught?
For foreign language, I would say the classes in Japan for English, their whole thing is they're really pushing that it has to be fun. Like it has to be fun. Like
Cool.
I can't remember learning French in school, and I didn't learn. I in England you don't start learning foreign languages until year 6, which I think is 5th grade for you guys. I don't know what it's like in America. But then I did
6 years old is about first grade, I think.
no year 6. So
Oh,
it's
gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
it's called year 6, but it's like
Okay.
5th grade.
Gotcha.
You're about 12 or something,
Something like
and that's
that.
when we start learning foreign languages, and we start learning French. And I remember just being very dry and boring. I think we do some songs and stuff, but you're kind of at the age where you're kind of over singing songs. So
Yeah.
I remember it just being really dry and boring, and a lot of just repeating. And but in Japan, it's all about the games and catching them when they're a little bit younger.
Sweet.
Yeah,
Yeah. Sounds like it was a fun time.
it was great. Yeah. Is there anything else that so what are you writing? Is this like a report you need to give, or
I'm going to share this video with my professor, and we're going to have a discussion about technology in the classroom and international classrooms. So it's really great that you brought up games and how that works, and the difference between the students accepting of their learning via using technology like iPads and Apple TV, and the recordings. And then even just the difference between like a blackboard and a whiteboard in a classroom. Those are all really interesting and important facts. That those are technological artifacts, even though they're not computer or anything like that. But it does help kind of shed light on how learning was engaged in Japan. And I'm just so fascinated by the rock paper scissors games. I really like that because just the idea that in the elementary classes in the public schools, it was all about being fun, and that's a really useful tool for retention. So those kinds of things are what we're going to be talking about. So
good?
yeah. So thank you so much for your interview, Rosie.
You. Yeah, just email me if you have any more questions.
All right, will do. Thanks.
Thank you.